Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She looked me dead in the eyes when she said it, her voice cold and steady. Find someone who wants to be intimate with you, because I don't want. She didn't whisper it in frustration or slip it out in the heat of an argument. She declared it like a sentence, a final verdict on what we had. Her words weren't just rejection, they were a dare. A dare to call her bluff, to see if I had the strength to walk away. I didn't answer. I didn't ask why. I didn't plead for closeness or beg for explanations. I just stood there, silent, and let her words settle like dust in a room gone stale. She thought silence meant weakness, but in that moment, my silence was sharper than any argument. Inside me, something turned off, something she never expected. That night, I didn't stay in the house with her tension hanging over me. I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and left her standing in the living room, waiting for a reaction that never came. She called after me once, her voice uncertain now, but I didn't turn back. I drove with no destination, just the hum of the road and the clarity of her words ringing in my head. For years, I had been the one holding things together, the one who waited for her moods to pass, who filled the silences, who tried to bridge the distance she created. But with one sentence, she had freed me. Or maybe she had just forced me to finally free myself. I ended up at a quiet bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I sat with a drink in my hand, staring at the glass, when someone I hadn't seen in years walked in. Emily, an old friend from college. She spotted me instantly, her smile soft, familiar, unforced. We talked for hours, catching up like no time had passed. There was no tension, no distance, just ease. Something I hadn't felt in years. When I finally drove home, it was late. She was waiting, pacing by the window, her phone in her hand. She demanded to know where I had been. I answered simply, out. Nothing more. Her face fell, confusion mixing with anger, but I didn't explain. And that was the moment she realized her words had opened a door she couldn't close. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. She moved around the kitchen making coffee, humming to herself, pretending her words from the night before hadn't burned through everything between us. I sat at the table, calm, scrolling my phone, letting the silence stretch. She kept glancing at me, waiting for me to speak first, waiting for me to ask where we stood. I didn't. She tried small talk, asking if I had slept well, if I wanted breakfast. I shook my head. That was it. My quiet cut deeper than any argument could have. She was used to me filling the silence, chasing after scraps of closeness. Now the silence belonged to me, and she didn't know how to live in it. Later, when she reached for her card at Target, I knew she felt the first real shift. I had already rerouted funds, closed the joint account. Her card declined, and the text came through instantly, sharp and demanding. Why isn't this working? I didn't answer. When she came home, her tone was clipped, her words sharp. She asked if I was trying to punish her. I told her no, and nothing more. That night, I didn't wait for her to ask where I was going. I grabbed my keys, left, and didn't explain. She was standing in the doorway when I pulled out of the driveway, her arms folded, her face tense. I could almost hear her thoughts. Who was I meeting? Where was I going? Why wasn't I staying? But I gave her nothing. Instead, I met Emily again. Not planned, not forced, just natural. We talked about everything but the past, and for the first time in years, I felt seen, not tolerated. Emily laughed easily, her eyes meeting mine without expectation. I didn't need to say much. She understood without me explaining. When I returned home late, the house lights were still on. She was waiting again, pacing. She demanded to know where I had been, who I was with. I shrugged, told her I was out, and walked past her. She followed me down the hall, her voice rising, but I didn't answer. I closed the guest room door behind me, leaving her in silence. That was the moment the balance shifted. For years, she had rationed intimacy, believing I'd wait forever. But now, she was the one waiting, pacing, restless in her own house. And I knew exactly where this was going. She was about to learn what silence really felt like. By the third day, she couldn't ignore the shift anymore. Her confidence had cracks in it, and I saw them widening each hour. She hovered in the kitchen when I came in from work, asking where I'd been, who I'd talked to, why I seemed so distant. I told her nothing. Just out, or busy. Each short answer tightened the knot in her chest, though she tried to hide it behind forced smiles. That evening, she made dinner like it was a performance. The table set neatly, wine glasses filled, a candle flickering between us. She leaned forward, trying to draw me out with a softer tone, saying we should reconnect. I nodded politely, ate in silence, then stood up when I was finished. She stared at the half-full glass of wine in her hand, her smile dissolving as I walked away. The next morning, she changed tactics. She dressed sharper, perfume heavy in the air, her heels clicking across the hardwood. She made sure I saw her before she left, tossing a quick line about meeting friends. Normally, I would have asked who, where, when. Not this time. I just nodded once, tied my shoes, and left before she could close the door. That night, when she came back, her mask had slipped. She tried to act like everything was fine, but her eyes betrayed her. They flicked toward me constantly, searching for jealousy, for suspicion, for anything that meant I still cared enough to fight. But I wasn't fighting anymore. I was already outside the ring, watching her throw punches into the air. The silence became unbearable for her. She followed me from room to room, asking questions she didn't want the answers to. Do you even care? Is there someone else? What's happening to us? I kept my voice calm, steady, and told her I was just tired. That was all. The less I gave, the more frantic she became. At night, I heard her pacing, whispering into her phone. Whoever she was talking to, it wasn't giving her peace. Her laughter was forced, her tone brittle, like someone trying to convince themselves of something they no longer believed. Meanwhile, I felt lighter. Every mile I drove away from the house, every moment I spent outside of her orbit, felt like breathing fresh air after years underground. She thought she had trapped me in her silence, but she didn't realize I had learned how to use it better than she ever could. And soon, she was going to feel the weight of that silence pressing in on every corner of her life. The first real crack appeared when I saw the message. She had left her phone on the counter, screen glowing, a preview of a text visible. I didn't touch it, didn't scroll, didn't need to. Just a few words were enough to tell me what I had already suspected. Someone else was circling her life, and she wanted it that way. I didn't confront her. That would have given her drama, a fight she could feed on. Instead, I closed the phone gently, set it back exactly how she left it, and walked away. My silence wasn't ignorance, it was control. She thought she had secrets, but the truth was I had already stepped far enough outside her reach that none of them mattered. That night, I shifted my strategy further. After dinner, I went upstairs, collected my passport, my birth certificate, a few files that mattered, and locked them in a case she couldn't open. The keys went into my pocket, and from that moment on, everything important was mine alone. When she came into the room later, her tone was sharp, almost mocking. She asked why I was so quiet, why I didn't want to talk. I gave her the same answer I had before, just tired. She didn't buy it, but she had nothing to push against. My calm was a wall she couldn't climb. 2 nights later, she tried again with a performance. She poured herself into a dress she hadn't worn in months, made dinner look like something out of a magazine, and waited for me to notice. I sat across from her, polite, distant, and finished my plate without comment. When she finally snapped and asked if I even saw her, I told her calmly, I see everything. Then I stood up and walked away. Her face in that moment told me everything. She realized I wasn't blind, wasn't oblivious. I knew more than she wanted me to, and my silence wasn't weakness. It was a choice. A choice that left her with nothing to grab onto. That night, she stayed up late, whispering into her phone, her voice urgent, desperate. I lay in the guest room, calm, detached, listening to the muffled words. She was scrambling, trying to hold on to something slipping through her fingers, and I didn't need to take anything from her. She was losing it all by herself, piece by piece, while I stood still, steady, untouchable. It didn't take long before the pressure she tried to hide began to show. She had always worn her confidence like armor, but now, the dents were visible. Her voice carried tension when she spoke. Her hands trembled when she thought I wasn't watching. And every time her phone buzzed, her expression changed. First hope, then frustration, then fear. I didn't press her. I didn't ask who it was. Instead, I started pulling back even further. At lunch breaks, I began visiting the bank, moving more assets into my name alone. I changed passwords, locked accounts, secured every piece of my life that mattered. She didn't notice at first, She thought my silence meant she still had control. But each day, her grip weakened while mine tightened. The man she thought she could lean on was already unraveling, though she didn't know how much I had seen. His name wasn't hard to find, and his record was even easier to uncover. Debts he tried to bury, deals that smelled like fraud, whispers of people he had crossed. I didn't need to confront him. I didn't even need to say his name. All I had to do was make sure the right eyes saw what he had been hiding. And when they did, the fallout was immediate. She came home one evening shaken, her words sharp as she muttered that people were spreading lies, that someone she knew was being targeted unfairly. She defended him with a desperation I hadn't seen before, her hands gripping the counter as if it could hold her steady. I sat at the table, sipping my coffee, silent. She searched my face for something, for anger, for jealousy, for recognition, but I gave her nothing. The following week, her mask slipped further. She left the house in a hurry, dressed in a rush, her phone glued to her hand. When she returned late that night, her eyes were red, her voice brittle. She tried to walk past me, but I looked up once and said, "Long day." Nothing more. She froze, swallowed hard, and went upstairs without another word. She thought she could play me with distance, with rejection, with secrets. But now, she was the one spinning in circles, desperate to keep control as everything around her fell apart. And the more she unraveled, the calmer I became, because I knew exactly where this was heading. She wasn't just losing me. She was about to lose everything. The unraveling came faster than I expected. One evening, she walked through the door and slammed her purse down with a force that echoed through the house. Her face was pale, her eyes frantic. She asked if I had heard the rumors. I didn't answer. I just looked at her, calm, steady, and let the silence cut into her nerves. She snapped then, her words spilling out about how unfair it was, how people didn't understand, how he was being dragged into something he didn't deserve. I listened without comment. Every frantic word she spoke was proof she was no longer in control. Her voice cracked when she asked if I believed what people were saying. I only replied, "I don't need to believe anything." That silence landed harder than shouting ever could. She stormed upstairs, and for the first time, I didn't follow. I sat there, letting her feel the weight of her own choices pressing down. Over the next days, her social circle shifted. Friends who once praised her started asking questions. Her coworkers looked at her differently. Even her sister, who had always supported her, grew distant. I saw the panic set in as she realized that it wasn't me pulling away anymore. It was everyone else. She had built her life on appearances, and now the mask was slipping in front of everyone. At night, she tried to test me again. She dressed carefully, sprayed perfume, and asked if I was going out. I told her nothing. Just put on my jacket and left. The truth was, I didn't need to explain where I was going, because my absence said more than my presence ever could. She watched from the doorway, her face tight, her arms crossed. But this time she didn't ask who I was with. She already feared the answer. When I returned home, she was still awake, sitting on the couch in the dark. She didn't ask where I had been. She just stared at me with an expression I hadn't seen before, fear mixed with regret. But I didn't acknowledge it. I walked past her, upstairs, and closed the door behind me. That was the night she finally realized she wasn't the one withholding anymore. I was, and I wasn't giving her anything back. She had told me once to find someone else. What she didn't realize was that I already had. Not another woman, not another lover, just a life without her. A life where her games had no power. And now, she was the one begging silently for a place in it. Her breaking point showed itself in small ways first. The dishes piled up, her makeup sat untouched, and the sharpness in her tone gave way to something else, hesitation. She had spent months rationing out affection like it was a privilege I had to earn. Now, she hovered near me, hoping for scraps of conversation, waiting for a glance or a word to anchor her. I gave her none. One night, she finally snapped. She stood in the doorway of the guest room where I'd been sleeping, her voice trembling. She asked if we could talk, if we could reset. I stayed seated, tying my shoes, calm and silent. She pressed harder, asking if there was someone else. I looked at her once and said, "You told me to find someone who wanted me." Maybe I listened. That sentence shattered her composure. She staggered back like I'd struck her, her face draining of color. From then on, the energy in the house shifted completely. She no longer tried to provoke me with coldness. Instead, She scrambled to win back ground she had already lost. She cooked elaborate meals, left notes on the counter, tried to laugh like we used to. But all of it felt staged, forced, hollow. I didn't reject her openly. I just didn't respond. And the silence was louder than any fight we had ever had. The cracks in her other life widened too. The man she had leaned on for validation was unraveling publicly now. His name was whispered in circles she couldn't silence. People she thought were loyal avoided her calls, answered her questions with half-truths, kept their distance. She walked through the house like a ghost, clutching her phone, her eyes hollow from lack of sleep. One evening, I returned home later than usual. She was sitting on the couch, her phone on the table, her eyes fixed on me. For the first time in years, she didn't try to speak first. She just looked at me, waiting, hoping I would throw her a lifeline. I walked past her, set my keys on the counter, and went upstairs without a word. That was the night she realized the silence wasn't temporary. It wasn't a punishment. It was the end. And the worst part for her was knowing she had written the ending herself. For me, the weight was gone. I was lighter with every step away from her world. For her, the silence was unbearable, echoing through every room she used to control. And soon, she would understand that I was already gone, even while I was still standing in the same house. The silence between us turned into something she couldn't stand anymore. She began filling the house with noise, music playing in the kitchen, the TV on in the background, even phone calls on speaker just to prove she wasn't alone. But none of it touched me. I moved through the house like a shadow, silent, detached, untouchable. One night, she tried to corner me. I had just come back from a late run, sweat still on my shirt, when she blocked the hallway. Her voice cracked as she asked if I wanted a divorce. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just told her, "You already asked for this when you told me to find someone else." Then I walked past her, leaving her standing there in silence. That sentence haunted her. I could see it replaying in her head every time she looked at me. She started showing up at my workplace, unannounced, bringing lunch, pretending it was casual, trying to stake a claim in a place she had never bothered with before. My coworkers gave me looks, some pity, some confusion. I stayed professional, calm, and let her presence speak louder than anything I could have said. She had become the one chasing, and everyone could see it. The man she thought would be her backup plan had collapsed completely. I heard through others that his debts had caught up with him, that he was scrambling to hold his life together. And now, she was tied to that downfall by whispers she couldn't silence. Her friends didn't rally to protect her. They distanced themselves, quietly but firmly. At home, her frustration turned to desperation. She sat at the dining table one night, tears in her eyes, whispering that she didn't mean what she had said before, that she hadn't wanted me to take her words literally. I listened, calm, expressionless, then stood and left the room. No response, no argument, no comfort, just silence. That was when she broke completely. She wasn't the confident woman who once declared she didn't want me. She was a shell, pacing the house, watching me with pleading eyes, waiting for words that would never come. And I knew then that I didn't have to raise my voice or explain myself. The silence was enough. It had done what arguments never could. She had told me to find someone who wanted me. And now she was finally seeing what it looked like when I did exactly that. By the time the 9th week rolled around, the house didn't feel like hers anymore. The air had shifted. The walls themselves seemed to echo with the silence she couldn't escape. She had gone from declaring she didn't want me to begging silently for me to notice her again. Every move she made was desperate, every glance a plea. She tried one last time to flip the script. She waited for me in the kitchen, dressed carefully, a forced smile on her face, her hands trembling slightly as she poured wine into 2 glasses. She offered me one like it was a peace treaty, her eyes searching mine for a crack in the wall I had built. I accepted the glass, set it down untouched, and walked away. The sound of the glass on the counter was louder than any argument we could have had. Later that night, I heard her crying in the bedroom, muffled, almost frantic. The woman who once declared proudly that she didn't want me near her was now terrified of the distance she had created. But I didn't step in. I didn't comfort her. I let the silence grow until it consumed everything she thought she controlled. At work, my colleagues noticed the difference in me. I carried myself lighter, freer. One of them asked if I had been working out more. Another said I looked sharper, more focused. And they weren't wrong. I had started reclaiming the parts of myself I had let wither under her coldness. I stayed longer at the gym, spent more time with people who valued me, rebuilt routines that reminded me who I was before her. Meanwhile, she began losing her grip outside the house too. Friends stopped inviting her to dinners. Family members kept their distance. Even her social media posts, once full of likes and comments, sat empty now. The image she had built so carefully was collapsing, and she could feel the eyes of everyone watching. One evening, as I was heading out, she stood by the door, blocking my way. Her voice cracked as she whispered that she needed me, that she couldn't do this alone. I looked at her once, calm, steady, and said nothing. I stepped past her, closed the door behind me, and left her standing in the silence she had created. That was the moment I knew she finally understood. The distance between us wasn't temporary, it wasn't a phase, and it wasn't punishment. It was permanent, and the final step was already waiting. The end came without shouting, without a final fight. It was a quiet Saturday morning when I finished packing the last of my things. The important documents were already locked away, my accounts secured, my new place ready. All that was left in the house were her echoes, memories of words she couldn't take back. She came downstairs and froze when she saw the bags by the door. Her eyes widened, her face pale, her hands gripping the railing as if it could hold her steady. She asked what I was doing, her voice trembling between anger and fear. I looked at her once, calm, collected, and told her nothing. Words would have given her hope. Silence ended it. When she realized I wasn't going to explain, she broke. She pleaded, saying she didn't mean what she had said months ago, that she was just angry, that she wanted to fix things. She promised we could start over. I listened, quiet, watching her fall apart in front of me. For years, she had controlled everything with her silence. Now, she was crumbling under mine. I picked up the bags, walked to the door, and paused. She was crying now, her voice rising, begging me not to leave. She asked if there was someone else, if I had already replaced her. I turned once, calm, steady, and said, "You told me to find someone who wanted me." I did. Her face collapsed, her knees buckled, and she sank into the couch like the words had knocked the breath out of her. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and never looked back. By the time she realized I was serious, I was already driving down the highway, the morning sun hitting my windshield. My phone buzzed again and again with her messages, but I didn't read them. There was nothing left to say. That afternoon, while she sat in the silence of an empty house, I sat across from Emily at a small cafe. She smiled, calm, unforced, nothing like the coldness I had endured for so long. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. The truth was simple. I hadn't lost her. She had lost me. She had dared me to find someone else, thinking I never would. But when I finally did, it wasn't just about another woman. It was about finding myself again. And that was the part she would never understand. I didn't leave to punish her. I left because I had finally remembered my worth. And once I walked out that door, I was never coming back. Been through it. When they crossed the line, and you made sure they felt it.